All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this recap of Bible study from the other day. This is Mark chapter 4. We had a great discussion. There's a lot packed into this. And so often we are familiar with these stories and these parables that are shown here, but rarely do we see them like we're looking at them now, which is to see how they are connected to each other and connected to the overall flow of this chapter. And in some sense, the teaching part of this leads to a pop quiz that all of the disciples fail. All right, so let's check this out. So if we're looking at Mark 4, this is a teaching chapter. When I say that it's full of parables, it's full of Jesus teaching the people, teaching the disciples specific things. But what's interesting is the way it starts. Again, he began to teach beside the sea. Such a very large crowd gathered around him that he got into a boat on the sea and sat there while the whole crowd was beside the sea. You think that Mark is trying to put forth the idea that the sea is here and that the sea is important. And I think it is. And one of the reasons it is and the ways it is the sea is a really important symbol for the people of fear, of the uncontrolled, of danger. Because this is a world where if you send your family members out on a boat, chances are that they will not return, and that's a reality that they know about. And so the sea is represented as something that is a fearful kind of thing. Reinforcing that is the Greek word for sea that is used here in each time, Thalassa. And the deal is with Thalassa is that there are other words that you could use to describe sea, but Thalassa is used because Thalassa is the name of a Greek god, a deity who is dangerous and spiteful and you know like the sea itself, full of dangers, and so it's almost a sense here that the sea is seen as somewhat demonic. Now, if we think about that with Jonah, we think about Jonah's probably the biggest representation of the sea in one of the Old Testament stories. And you see, there's danger, there's fear, there's a part where they think that Jonah's cursed, or they throw him into the sea. It just so happens that one of the ideas also coming forth here is that God has the power to work within the sea. Job has a similar, there's a lot of sea imagery within, and all of it seems to respond to the idea of God's sovereignty also. I picked out a couple of Psalms that have this sea imagery, and so I want to look at those as well. Look at 69. Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. I sink in the miry depths where there is no foothold. I have come into deep waters. The floods engulf me. I'm worn out for calling for help. My throat is parched. My eyes fail looking for my God. So you see there that water, or the rising water, is there symbolic of the troubles and fears and pain and things that we're afraid of, that are rising around us. You could say that is true for Jesus. Remember in the last chapter, his family thought he was crazy. There's a sense that this crowd that's coming in around him, that's forcing him into the water, that is a crazy, that is like almost like a sea flood, like open up the floodgates of people kind of situation. Also, you have the Jewish leaders plotting to kill him already. So there's a sense that there is unknown danger, and using the sea here brings that to the forefront as a symbol. Psalm 46, probably one of the most familiar. God is our refuge and strength, and ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. Though its waters roar and foam and the mountain quakes with their surging, there is a river whose streams makes glad the city, etc., etc., etc. Look at Psalm 89. You roll over the surging sea, when its waves mount up, you still them. Um, all of this stuff is foreshadowing what's going to happen at the end of this chapter when Christ himself calms the sea. But how interesting is it that he's going to be teaching them about faith, and the sea imagery is all over this, and yet they don't have faith. when the time comes. Look at this. I thought this one was interesting from Revelations 21:1. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea, right? No longer any of this fear of the sea, any of this demonic kind of idea with the sea. Now, this is kind of one of my favorite ones, and this is the idea of sea and how representational it is in the idea of how they saw the world and how they see God's creation in it. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters, right? So we have waters here, and we have the deep. Formless and void is kind of an interesting word. It comes from the Greek, it comes from Hebrew, to'o vavo'u. And to'o, we actually did this the other day because there was a well at where we stayed when we went to Gordonsville. But if you throw a rock down a deep well, the sound that it makes coming up is to'om, to'om, to'om. So the idea there of this word that is translated off usually void is the deepest, darkest pit of a well with some water down there. That is the kind of their understanding of void, of emptiness, of darkness, but again, water. The formless part, Vavo'u, is actually a Babylonian chaos demon, kind of like Thalassa. And so there's a sense that what God is doing when he is creating, which is the word bara, which is a verb that only God can do, is God is going into this chaos and this void and creating order. He's holding back the chaos monster. He's holding back the chaos. He's holding back the sea. And you'll see that coming up. And God saw that the light was good, let there be light, blah, blah, blah. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, darkness called night, and there was evening and morning. Then God said, let there be a dome or a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And there's a sense to separate heaven, the waters in the heavens from the waters in the earth. It's creating space with the chaos kind of outside of it. So God made the dome and separated the waters, and where there waters, dome, water, God called a sky, etc. Now, look, God said, let the waters under the sky be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters were called together. He called seas, and God saw that it was good. So you see very much here, God is separating water, separating that chaos, separating that outer stuff to create a place for life. And that's what land is. It's a place for life. And the sea is kind of a place that's outside of that, except these little stories that we've seen in the parables, in the Psalms, and in others show that God's power does exist outside in that water as well. And that's kind of a powerful thing. We could look at God parting the Red Sea in a similar way. He's holding back the water so that the people can come through. He does the same thing at the Jordan River. So there's this sense of the sea as kind of an important environmental thing going on here. And we might not realize that unless we were kind of looking at the entire thing. Normally we're blinded by these little details, by the parable of sower. Everybody knows that's the most important thing going on here. But yet this gives that background and a little bit of a clue as to how important this is, and the fact that we should see these stories in context with the calming of the sea later. These are not separate things. They are an enveloped thing between the seas on one hand and the seas on the other. All right, so sea is a surrounding concept, and it's repeated 3 times, and will close out the chapter. All of these things are connected. All right, at least that's the way we're going to look at it today. Now, the parable of the sower. He began to teach them many things in parables, and in his teaching he said to them, listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Other seed fell on rocky ground where it did not have much soil, and it sprang up quickly since it had no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. Other seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain. Other seed fell into good soil and brought forth good grain, growing up and increasing and yielding 30 and 60 and 100-fold. And he said, let anyone who has ears to hear listen. Now, I want to, I have it broken down here in a little chart exactly kind of what happens, because he goes on to explain the parable to the disciples in the next in the next paragraph. So he says, there is seeds planted in the rocky path, and birds come to eat them up. Rocky ground, the sun scorches. In the thorns, they are choked. In the good soil, you bear fruit, right? And then he says, let anyone who has ears to hear listen. So if you can figure this out on your own, listen, and you can. But then it's weird because he then gives secret information also to the disciples to make sure that they get it. So it's always that question of what is the purpose of giving different information? Um, he says, we think that the reason that you teach in parables is that parables are a way for people to relate to the story, that you're not just teaching facts, but that you're teaching something that these people can relate to. They may be farmers and they understand this, what seeds are like. But it's interesting because it always seems when it talks about the purpose of parables, it is, they quote this part from the Old Testament: they may indeed look but not perceive, and may indeed listen but not understand, so that they may not turn again and be forgiven. Um, there's a sense that Jesus realizes that some people aren't going to understand this. They're not going to do the work, and he's not making it easy for them. So it's really kind of the opposite. We think about parables as ways that we can relate to the story. Jesus is kind of saying that this is a little bit of a barrier. You have to kind of do the work. And it's similar to what we've seen so far with the miracles that he's putting forth. He's putting forth these miracles, but the proclamation of the truth is really what he wants people to learn. But he won't let the demons tell him flat out. He wants people to understand it on their own. So he must think that in some way we have that ability, and he wants to pull that out of us, and maybe that's the teacher in me who thinks that that's a good way of teaching, is you have to have faith in your students. So let's look then now at this third column, which is shown in the description of the parables. He said to them, do not understand the parables, then how will you understand all the parables? The sower sows the word. These are the ones on the path where the word is sown. And when they hear, Satan immediately comes and takes away the word that is sown in them. So the birds are Satan. And in this sense, it seems like the sowing of the word, what does Satan do is we see him in Genesis 1, and we see him throughout. He lies. He twists the truth to some other form. And that is what causes this word. The word is sown, and then it's distorted and changed, and it doesn't grow in the right way. And these are the ones sown on rocky ground, and when they hear the word, they immediately receive it with joy. This is this one, rocky ground, which the sun. They have no root and endure only for a while, and then when trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, they immediately fall away. So we have rocky ground, sun, which is trouble or persecution. It's like when the heat is turned up, you just can't quite handle it. Others are sown among the thorns, and these are the ones who hear the word, but the cares of the world and the lure of wealth and desire for other things come in. So these are the people that make other choices, and become distracted by greed or wealth or whatever. He says, let anyone who has ears listen. If you can understand this, let's go. So what we normally do, and I preached on these, not from Mark last summer, but from Luke, and this succession of parables is in a row there. It was like 3 weeks in a row I was talking about seeds, and all of it was about the cultivation of soil. But what I didn't understand, what I didn't see until this, it's not really the soil. I mean, the soil is rocky and there's thorns and stuff, but there always seems to be something that comes and from the outside and causes problems for there's like an invasion, right? In this it's the birds, and this it's the sun, and this it's the thorn. The good soil is the lack of those, right? So there's no outside thief that comes and kind of causes the problem. So we don't get really a sense of what the soil is. There's a sense that there has to be good roots, because rocky ground and thorns and all of those things are different. Um, but really is the key is that there is nothing that comes along and steals it. There's no outside thief. And so that could lead us to think that what we have to do to cultivate soil is to protect it, to keep things protected, and so that it can't be stolen. And then Jesus, like Jesus does, as soon as you think you've got it covered, he makes you think again. Because the next little section is about a lamp under a bushel basket. He said to them, is a lamp brought in to be put under the bushel basket, or is under the bed and not on the lampstand? For there is nothing hidden except to be disclosed, nor is anything secret except to come to light. Let anyone who hears ears to hear listen, right? So there is a sense here that um maybe he's talking about the purpose of the parables, right? That the parables are given kind of in secret and mystery, but they need to come forward. Another thing could be the fact that with this good soil, if you protect it, does that mean, putting the light under the bushel? Because that in itself will not allow the thing to come to its full purpose. Like a light needs to be shown. So you can't hide it. You've got to be trusting of what the deal is. Um, it's the question. It's like, what is good soil? How do you create it? From outside issues that arise, from Satan, from trouble, from cares of the world. But if you hide those things, you aren't shining the light. You're not allowing the seed to be out in the world in this kind of metaphorical sense. So how do you cultivate soil that produces fruit that can withstand trouble? That's really what we're at here, right? What is it about it that can withstand trouble? We've already seen that Satan really isn't that much. Lies versus truth is all. So coming to know the truth. So how can you avoid the sun scorching the suns of the trouble without hiding your light? We see that so often. Well, in the way we raise children or whatever, we protect them, and sometimes we end up causing the things that we're trying to protect them from to create problems in itself. That we don't want our kids to fail, we don't want them to get in trouble, we don't want, but then they never learn how to deal with diversity, and we see that, not diversity, adversity, and we see that so often in what we're doing. And and again, remember, the disciples at the end of this chapter are going to face some adversity, and they're going to fall away too. So we can't really answer this ourselves. The easy answers that we come to, Jesus pokes holes in. So look at what he does here in the parable of the growing seed. He also said, the kingdom of God is as if someone would scatter seed on the ground and would sleep and rise night and day, and the seed would sprout and grow. He does not know how. The earth produces of itself first the stalk, then the head, then the full grain in the head. When the grain is ripe, at once he goes in with his sickle, because the harvest is come. This is describing the mystery of the way that God works in turning a seed into a plant that can be harvested. And the sower is outside of that process. He's observing of the process, he's watching the process, he's checking it out, but he is not sure exactly how that comes to be. So there is a sense, a lot of times we make the sower in here to be Jesus, or the sower to be God, and but in this case, there is a role for God, and it is the protection in the bringing forth the seed to fruit. So there seems to be a limitation to how much we can do to produce this thing, like cultivating the soil, doing all of those things. If we think that these are the steps that we can ensure fruit to come to be, it just isn't. We're not in control of all of it. And we think about that like, two children raised in the same house. You could say that is the same soil. they're protected in the same way. How come one of them develops in a good positive direction and the other one struggles? It's a common thing. It happens all the time. There's something to the process that is about God's work. And Jesus is basically saying that in the mustard seed here. So, or in the growing seed. Now he goes to the mustard seed, which is really really a cool. He also said, "With what can we compare the kingdom of God, or what parable will we use for it? It is like a mustard seed, which, when sown upon the ground, is the smallest of the seeds on earth. Yet when it is sown, it grows up and becomes the greatest of all shrubs, and puts forth large branches, so that the birds of the air can make nests in its shade." How about that, right? Birds and nest, birds and shade, nest and sun. All of a sudden, the power of God is to take the tiniest of seed and defeat the enemies that have been taking away the other seeds by bringing forth the fruit. That is a really amazing thing. Kingdom of heaven takes away the dangers one by one that could threaten the seeds so that they can each grow, right? Because it was the birds who were represented, the Satan coming across and changing that. These birds are put into a nest, taken care of, rendered harmless because their needs are fulfilled. And then it's in the same thing, it creates shade and sun. So look at how, in other parts of in the other gospels, and that you see the mustard seed being a symbol of faith. So check out the way that God cultures faith, and faith allows for the things that hurt the seeds, the birds and the shade, or Satan and troubles and affliction and persecution. God takes those things away through faith by giving us something that we can rest in, that we can give a shade that gives us like this. And it's the smallest thing to the biggest thing. And we don't really know the mystery that causes that. Only God does. That's the power of these parables when seen together. Like, so often we'll like go at one and we'll jump over the others, and we won't see the connection. But in this chapter, we see that connection, that growing sense that all of these things are connected, because he goes out of his way to say that the problems are the birds and the sun. And how awesome is it that the solution found by the parable of the mustard seed deals and gives comfort to the birds and the sun? Amazing. Renders them neutral, renders them taken care of. Forgiveness of sin, right? Wrap your mind around the forgiveness of sin. That's putting the nest. And then the dealing with future persecution and trouble, that's the shade. All from the faith of a mustard seed. Awesome. Awesome. All right. Now, so then here we are to the pop quiz at the end. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go to the other side." So let's go out into the sea, all of us. And that's leaving behind the place in Galilee with the Jews. It's going to pagan places, Gentile places, going across. And leaving the crowd behind, they took with them in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion, and they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Notice that it says in the stern, right? Like, so he's out in the, I mean, you could think that this boat doesn't have like a cabin below. I've almost always kind of thought it that way. No, this is the rain and the wind and everything is pelting him, and he's still asleep, it would seem. How about that as an image? But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. They woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up, rebuked the wind, said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. He said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" In other words, great time on your pop quiz. Everybody failed. They were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who is this then, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" The language of this mirrors exactly the healing of the unclean spirit, the exorcism that was earlier in the gospel. So this is more like exorcism than miracle. Any kind of being, any kind of paganism that is going on, we are making sure that we understand that those things are absolutely subservient to God. They don't exist. They are not a worry for us because God is so much more powerful than they are. Why though? Disciples fail this quiz. Why? Because they have fear instead of faith. The sun scorched them. When the heat was turned on, it was too much and they fell away. They weren't living in the shade of the mustard seed, even with Jesus with them. And that is a problem, right? They are still planted on the rocky ground because at the first sign of trouble, they lose faith. The parable of the sower is told, and then it is seen in the practice of life right afterwards. It's amazing. Um, this reinforces the understanding of God's kingdom coming near in the person of Jesus Christ. And it also shows us that we might want to think about how easy we might think faith is, right? Like sometimes we think, well, I have faith, I'm saved, I have all this, and then, but do we have the kind of faith that can withstand persecution? Do we have the kind of faith that can be calmly sleeping in the stern of a boat that is being pelted? Or are we like the disciples and we have fear in our hearts and we have faith at times, but we lose faith at others and we're confused and we need to keep going through this. We need to keep um, our minds on the ways that God is working on us like we are seeds and just kind of allow for his hand to be at work. I mean, there's powerful stuff. Again, Mark continues chapter after chapter to have real depth within the words that he uses and within the details that he strings together, seemingly so quickly and sporadically, but there is real connection here. So, all right, well, that is all for chapter 4. Look forward to Sunday's sermon, which will be, I think, called something along the lines of Pop Quiz Failed. Well, look forward to that on Sunday, and we will talk again soon. Bye-bye.